My name's Liz Harris and I'm a junior at Manhattan College. This project all started last spring after I took a course on the Holocaust and Genocide at school. Before I took the class, I really didn't know anything about the Holocaust. All I knew was that it was a terrible historical event, and I knew some of the very basic facts about it. After taking the class and after listening to a number of survivors speak and reading books and paying attention, I finally began to realize how important it is to remember events like these. And I hope that this film will help you realize how important it is to remember the Holocaust and how important it is to make sure that it doesn't happen again.
Mrs. Glaser was born in Tarnow, Poland in 1924. The Nazis forced her out of her home at the age of 14. She's the only member of her family who survived the Holocaust. Her father died before the Nazis invaded, but her mother, 2 brothers, her older sister, and her extended family were all taken away. This is a picture of her parents before the war. The Nazis incarcerated Mrs. Glaser in Plaszow, Auschwitz-Birkenau, Bergen-Belsen, Mauthausen, and Vennesberg. She sewed German uniforms in Auschwitz, worked in Plashow's salt mines, and cleaned airplanes in the Vennesberg Mountains. During her time in these camps, Mrs. Glaser and her friend, Fella, took care of one another and helped each other survive. This is a photo of Fella and her husband, Sidney, after the war. Mrs. Glaser was liberated at the end of World War II and came to America with her husband, Bernard. They settled in the Bronx and have 2 children and grandchildren.
When did you realize that the Nazis were coming in, and how did they begin to immediately change Tarnow?
When the war was declared, we knew that this is really happening. We realized, reading newspapers and knowing what happened, how they walked into Austria. So we knew exactly what is going on, and we couldn't do nothing about it. You know, you are trapped like an animal, and you cannot do nothing to escape, because at some points your whole system is brought to such a point that you feel that it's exploding, that any moment every item in that blood is going to like come out from you like a fountain. It's such a pressure on the whole system, such a horror, what people go through, what they can go through, and they don't burst. We wanted so much to live. We wanted so much to tell the world.
Can you tell me a little bit more about your school in Tarnow?
Yes, I went to a public school until I think after 3rd grade we moved. I always loved my school until one day something happened. Something happened and I just was heartbroken. When I found out that my transport is going to pass by my school, I was so happy, because I said at least I'd be able to say goodbye to my beloved school. From a distance, when we were approaching the school, Konarski School, I saw teachers and students looking, laughing, applauding, that finally Poland is, my town is getting rid of the Jews. And again I cried, because I was so moved that once more in my lifetime I'm going to see something that I love. And here you see people who saw such a horrible things being done to us. They could still laugh, be happy and applaud. Those people saw what happened to us. 1942, we went to the ghetto. My mother was gone at that time, but we, the 4 children, my sister and my 2 brothers, younger brothers, we went to live with my grandmother, who had one bedroom, 1 kitchen, and we were 13 people in that apartment. Before the high holidays, my brother, who was 4 years younger than I, they took him, and he knew exactly where he's going. He was 14 years old at that time, and we had, I remember 50 zlotys was very little, and we wanted to give it to him, and he said, where I am going, I won't be able to spend that money. And the following morning, we got the order that everybody, man, woman, child, sick, didn't matter, has to assemble on the upper flats, and which was this upper class was surrounded by the ghetto that was in the middle of the ghetto, and we were told not to bring any luggage. All day long you heard children cry. He was a very nice man, he was a Jewish policeman. He all of a sudden he came out carrying 4 babies, newly born, maybe the babies were maybe a week, and he kept them they were lying in a doorway. Parents, mothers put them there. They thought that maybe if they are not going to have those babies, they will survive and then they will come back to get them. But there wasn't such a thing with the Germans. They knew that something like that will happen. This place was surrounded with many buildings, and almost in every building you had children, little children. So he came out, his name was Bienenstock, this person, he was a Jewish policeman. And he carried those babies, and he said, women, please take a baby. But no woman wanted to take a baby. Some of them wanted to live so very much that they put away their babies. Next to me was a couple. I never spoke to them, but I was young, and they came probably to the ghetto from the provinces. I never saw them in my town before. And her baby was 2 weeks old, and she kept him in that pillow, and he was standing, her husband. They looked like sister and brother, very young. They were maybe 20 years old, dark hair, very dark complexion. And the German walked over to them, and he said, throw down the baby. And she cuddled to her husband. And the German repeated, put down the baby. So she didn't. So he got from his revolver, he knocked the baby out from her hand, and he shot the baby. She started screaming. He killed both of them. I remember standing in that line. It was so hot. That sun was so hot. And when we came to that Umschlagplatz, being that we were not allowed to carry any luggage, we put a lot of layers of clothing on our bodies. And I started shaking. And then my perspiration was like you would open up, I would be under a shower. My hair, my body, and from my head, the perspiration was dripping down my clothes. And I felt that my head is gone, being stopped, my nervous system like died down on me. And I didn't feel anymore any pain, I wasn't even scared anymore because I thought that I am dead. My little brother, he was at that time 6.5 years old, and my sister was 20. I was holding his coat, and we came closer and closer, and finally my sister walked over to the table from the assessment, and he said to her, "You go to the left, the boy is going to the right." My sister was holding his hand, and she's like, I was just behind her, and she straightened. She had the hair, her color of her hair was like yours, but she kept it on a point. She made a ponytail this particular morning, and she just straightened out, and she threw her head, and the hair touched my lips, and like a goodbye kiss, and she went with him to die. She knew exactly what she's going to do. And this was, and after that I don't know what was happening with me, because I was in such a horrible shock that at first I couldn't close my eyes. I couldn't blink my eyes. 1943, they liquidated the ghetto. At that time, we were only 2,000. You can imagine, at the beginning, we were 25,000, and we came to this train. We were about 120, standing position. Terribly hot, just a tiny little window above, between the tin roof and the wall. My friend Bella, right away she became hysterical. And she needed water, and we didn't have water. We didn't have anything. We just had a few things what we took with us. And her cousin was in that train. He was 2 years older than me, maybe 3 years old, and he had a bottle of vinegar, I remember. And I asked him to give me on my handkerchief, he should put a little vinegar for his cousin. But he didn't want to give it to me. He said, I don't know how long this trip would last, and I have to keep it for myself. So from my dry mouth, my saliva, I gave my friend my saliva. She should, I needed that saliva, but I gave it. I just put it on my handkerchief and I put it on her mouth. She should quiet down. She should have some moisture. The trains went directly to the barbed wire from the camp. Maybe even it crossed. And here, a new experience in front of my eyes. No more ghetto walls, but barbed wire very high. The watchtowers with soldiers, the Ukrainian soldiers carrying machine guns. And then I realized, somebody whispered that this is a Jewish cemetery, that they made a concentration camp. And I said, what kind of a cemetery it is? So they told me that it is Pashut. And I said, this is where my father was buried. Just 5 years ago. You had the SS and the Wehrmacht. We had also people in uniforms. And in my estimation, they looked like military. But then I looked at them, and they wore those gorgeous boots and those uniform boots high to their knees, and I found out that this is the Jewish police. The commandant, the German, the SS, yet he was a killer. He was a killer. He worked with dogs. And the smallest command, his dogs were trained to kill, to rip to pieces a person. And then they took us out to work. And our work was to carry stones. We carried stones back and forth. And all stones, but big, such a big ones. And also there was a lot of boards because the barracks were being built. So they told us to carry those boards from one end to the other. And that woman, that commandant's wife, that Marishenka, she was standing and cursing us. I remember she wore a Japanese silk robe in the morning. And we worked like that just on that black coffee what they gave us. And worked and back and forth without any purpose. That was absolutely no purpose in doing it. And then the fall came. And the electricity in the barracks wasn't put in the proper way, and we had a lot of fires. And we came in shoes, but the soil started falling off. And we constantly, our feet were constantly wet. And we took those shoes off, but we took a string and we just tried to put the sole in the tops of the shoe together. It shouldn't fall off. If not, we would walk barefoot. It was so horrible because gradually, they made it worse and worse and worse. And we were thinking, God said, how can people endure so much? But we endured unbelievable hardships. The sanitary conditions were absolutely unbelievable. You had these outhouses, just like the barracks, tremendously long barracks. You had the toilets, wooden, with holes underneath. You had them one next to the other, hundreds of them, in the back and in the front. Every morning, 6 o'clock, we were standing already on the upper flats. And they were counting and counting and counting and counting. It could rain and snow and thunder, but we were standing. And I worked in a factory sewing the German uniforms. So I always was with my friend Fela. We worked in the mines for 3 months. And then we were brought back and to Plaszow. In Plaszow, I was finishing the suits which went to the Eastern Front for the German soldiers. That was a pants and suit in a jacket. We were 5 or 6 or 7 women sitting around a table, and there was one scissors only on this table. So we were sewing the buttons with a wire, and yet this is the German commandant who walked with dogs and with guns and was killing people like flies. He came to observe how we work, and I was sewing a button, and he was standing behind my back. And I was afraid to reach out for this pair of scissors. So I said to myself, how long can I sew that button? how many times can I sew that button? I couldn't go to the next button because you have to cut the thread. And my teeth started shaking, loose. My teeth were very loose from malnutrition, we didn't eat, no vitamins and so on. And I bit on that wire and I broke this front tooth. And that front tooth remained in my mouth. And I broke it to the root. And a few days later, when we came to camp from Tarnów, we brought as much clothing as we wore as much. So Fela took my coat and I took my sister's coat. But they took everything away from us at that time in Plaszow, in the camp when we came. So right after, maybe a day after I broke my tooth, maybe 2 days later, there was an announcement was being made that whoever had 2 coats, you should come to the other, which is the Jewish police, and you should report. And I came into this office, and Hilevich, that's the commandant, the Jewish commandant, he was sitting with those shiny boots, with a desk in front of him, and a swirling chair, leather chair, with his feet on the top of the desk. And Finkelstein was his second in command of was standing behind him, and I came in, and he just didn't pay attention, nothing, like I would be a piece of wreck. And he was talking and talking. I was so scared that I didn't, and so nervous that I didn't know even what he was saying. He didn't talk to me. But when I got so scared, and I was very shy, all my blood came to my face, and I was young. And they say that I wasn't that looking, and he said to the Finkelstein, Hilowicz, he said, in Polish, he's called Polish, he said, she is pretty. We are going to have an entertainment with her. Hilowicz said, yes, we are going to have a party with her. And before I said, for what I came, oh, he said, look at that. She's pretty, but she doesn't have her teeth. Each go, he said to me. I don't know how I flew out from that room. And then maybe for 10-15 minutes I was standing because I was paralyzed. I couldn't walk, I couldn't breathe. I felt that I'm going to fall down and die. And then I said, there is some kind of a power which destroyed my teeth, my front tooth. There is some strong power. And I didn't fall in their hands because everybody knew that they were ruthless when they found the girl. Then the last group of us was sent to Auschwitz. The Germans waited for you with dogs and couples wearing yellow raincoats. And they were having the selection. They always had to have the feed the flames, I mean the crematorium flames. So they, again, right, left, right. And finally they took us to Birkenau. And it's very hard to know time in Auschwitz. We came to Auschwitz, it was, I think, the first days in November, the first days, end of October. The first 8 days, it was pretty cold already. And before they brought us into this barracks, they took us to a shed. And we knew that we are going to die because on the walls from the shed, you had thousands of names, people who went through this place, through that barrack, that enclosed little thing, wrote their names. Goodbye, I was here this and this day, my name is this and this, and love to people what they knew, and thought that maybe they would come. So we ran quickly to look if we know some names, and in the morning they took us out and they brought us to a place where they told us to get completely undressed, naked. We had to step up. It was like a low stage. It was maybe as high as this. It was tremendous. Maybe 200 women fitted on them. They brought out hoses. We didn't see any people. And that water was so strong that it pushed us. The strength of that water was very painful on our body, on our bones, because we didn't have flesh, just skin and bone, as they say. And after a while, door opened. A whole group of officers, German officers, SS, came in. They looked us over. We were standing naked, and they took out only one woman. She was a woman, maybe she was 40, 50, 45 years old, and she had vertical veins, and they took her out naked, like that. They took her, she was never seen again. Probably she went to the gas chamber, and then they told us that we can get out, and we went, and they shaved people's hair off. When we came out, they just threw at us clothes. Frania was also a friend. She wore glasses, and she had freckles, and she had very green eyes. And Fela was taller than me, and they gave us clothes which were absolutely Halloween wears. I got a dress, nothing to wear underneath, just a cotton dress with black with white polka dots, with long sleeves, and a scarf, a shawl, lace black shawl, and 2 left shoes, all right, but they didn't, both shoes for the same foot. No socks, no stockings, no underwear, no nothing, just that dress. Fella got a little white hat with a point and a little red dress, probably a child's dress, Fella taller than me. And Frania got also something, she looked like Red Riding Hood. Immediately, the moment we put our clothes on, they painted a yellow cross on our bags, because we didn't have the numbers yet, and they were afraid that we can escape, We looked so hilarious that we couldn't stop laughing. That was our introduction to Auschwitz. And then they put us in those barracks. And after being there a couple of days, they changed us, the barracks, and this is when we got our numbers. And there were a couple of couples standing with those needles, and it took a second, boom, 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 and we didn't even know what hit us. But then we touched our hands, and this started like bleeding, because certain, some of that ink was on the surface. So we got scared that we are doing something. God knows what will happen. We erased our numbers. So we were told not to worry, that the number will be forever. And then we were in Birkenau maybe 2 days, 3 days. You had people from different parts of the world with different professions. We had a woman, a young woman, and she was maybe 25. She was a ballerina in Warsaw, prima ballerina, and she was teaching us the steps ballet steps, can you imagine? We tried with all our might to preserve our humanity, that we are human beings no matter what they do to us. No matter what, we talked about books, we talked a lot about food, what our mothers used to cook, and what we are going to cook if the war will be over. And we're worried how we are going to walk with our numbers on our arms. And somebody had a brilliant idea that we are going to wear many bracelets. Fela was sick again. Fela was always, she was strong like a horse, but she was always sick. She was in the hospital. Also in this compound where we had our SS Unterkunft, Wäscherei, that means the laundry, people lived in one building, and the experimental block where they made experiments on women. Everything was very close. You could hear screams coming out from the building. Fela got sick, and she told me, I went to visit, and when a person got sick, they took away the person's clothes, and the person was naked in the bed. And Fela is in that room, and she told me that if you won't cook for me soup, I kill myself. I die, she said. I said, are you crazy? In Auschwitz to cook soup? She said, you must, Gisela, I am so sick that I will die if I won't have soup. I said, how can I make soup? I didn't even know how to cook. She said, we have bread, take the bread, sell a piece of bread to somebody who has a piece of onion, sell a piece of bread to somebody who has a spoon of margarine, and to somebody who has a potato. And here you are, she said, take this, and the part, and in the rooms in SS in that building, we have those beautiful ovens from floor to warming ovens, not for cooking, but the warming ovens with pies, beautiful. This was like brownish red in the schmutzige Wäsche where Fela used to work. So I took a piece of bread, I bought just maybe a spoon of onions and a spoon of margarine and one tiny potatoes. And that stupid head, I cooked it, fried the onions. I fried the onions in that pot. And I said, my God, it smells like home. And this is fine. And I am ready to walk over. I put it through the opening in the schmutzige Wäsche, in the dirty laundry room. I said, and that room was a glass room, which was joined by a tremendous big room where I work, but everything was glass. They should see what we are doing, everything was glass. And I see this guy who is coming. He was Untersturmführer Smith. And he's running straight to that room where I used to work, but I am in the schmutzige Wäsche. And there is that treasure of the onion, frying onion. And he comes and he calls Shari Capo. The capo her name was Shari, and she was from Czechoslovakia. A little plummy woman. She was maybe 30 years old. Very nice woman. And she runs to him, and he screams. He said, who is frying? Who is cooking here in this building? And she didn't know. She said, I don't know. He said, and I hear, and I'm standing at the table, and I'm working with the dirty laundry, and I hear he says to her, listen, 5 minutes I give you. If you won't find the person who is cooking, you are going to get 25 lashes, and for any little thing they shave the couple's hair. So she had already maybe a half an inch of hair growing again on her scalp. So he said, and you are going to be shaven again. And my feet, my whole body was dead. Because you can imagine to go to say I am cooking the soup in Auschwitz on the Sturmwehr to a German SS man. But I said, she's not going to get the lashes in the hair and God knows what. And I opened the door. I'm not looking at him. I said to Shari in German, I said, I'm sorry, I've been cooking this soup. And he looks at me, and we are standing, the three of us, and he looks at me and he said, Verschwind, disappear, it says to me. And so I walked away, and he walked away. And Shari Kapo came to the room, and she called me Giska in Czech. She embraces me and she kisses me, Giska. You so brave. I would never believe that somebody would come in Auschwitz volunteer that you are the one. He said, why you come cooking? Don't you have enough food? I said, fella. Oh, she said, that fella is going to be your downfall. So the 15th or the 16th of January, 1945, 5 o'clock in the morning, there was an alarm. And all the couples from every building in every room had a couple. Announced that we have to be ready out in a half hour. I realized that I have to get Fela out of the infirmary because she was sick in the infirmary. I took with me the blanket, which I was covering myself, Fela and I, and went to look for somebody to help me to get Fela out from the infirmary, because Fela was on the first or second floor. And I found a friend of mine, and I asked her to help me, and we walked over to the building where the infirmary was located, and Fela was already standing waiting for me to get her out. The window was open, and Fela, the person, her name was Ruzha Wasserlauf. She and I, we were holding the blanket spread, and Fela jumped out of the window. The three of us fell down, but we were cushioned by the heavy snow which was laying on the ground. And Fela was still very sick. She had a high fever. And maybe an hour later, we left Auschwitz. We went on they called it the Dead March. It was January, and we had to walk through roads and fields covered with ice and snow, and whoever fell, the German soldiers shot. That white snow was covered with dark bodies and splattered with their blood. Finally, by evening, we stopped by a farm. I covered both of us with the blanket, but Fela was shivering. She had a very high fever. She was burning up like a fire, and I was blowing, trying to warm her up. And in the morning, we started walking again. And again the same thing. Again the people are falling. Thousands of people. And I think we walked like that for days and days, stopping at night. And until we came to a train station. And then we started going, not knowing where we are going. And Fela is sick. and she fell down like she fainted. And the girls, we knew each other. We were from Plaszow, we were from Auschwitz, so we tried to accommodate the people who were weaker and sick. Finally, we came to Bergen-Belsen, and we were assigned to a barrack which held already hundreds of Hungarian people. People were sitting, young and old, screaming and crying. Fela was constantly sick. People were dying of typhoid. And every day, a few dozens of people died from typhoid. And I realized that that we cannot survive Bergen-Belsen. And I also heard that there is a registration for people who would like to go to work. And I went and registered myself and I also took Fela with me. She should register herself. We should just get out of this death trap. Finally, the order came that we are going to leave the following day. From Bergen-Belsen, which is north of Germany, we drove all the way down. We were the first who came to live in those camps and help out building planes in the mountains. Prisoners of war from Spain and France, and political prisoners were working, also Germans. And we were about 150 women in this particular camp. Every morning when we got up, we saw a package already, which they used to take the body of a dead person and wrap in paper with string holding the paper, and they put these bodies out in front of the barracks, because many of those women died from typhoid. As I said, no medication. The only thing what was given to them was a little water. There were many air raids, and we heard the bombardment, and the Germans used to lock us in, but the sound of the planes was music to our ears. We were delighted that that there is fighting going on, that maybe soon Germany will be defeated. In April, we were told that we are leaving Venusberg. We were in those trains for 12 to 14 days. We traveled Germany, we traveled through Czechoslovakia back and forth, and again to Germany. They wanted to dispose of us in some place in a camp, but no camp was taking in anymore any people. We stopped a few times and we were allowed to get out from the trains, and we picked the grass. And sometimes the motorman was a decent person, so we asked for hot water from the motor, and we took that grass and put it in our pot, what we carried always with us, and we put some hot water in it, and we called it spinach soup. And that water was full of rocks and stones and soil, but it was food for us. Sometimes we were stopped on the trucks, and next to our trains were also German army trains. The German soldiers were peeling potatoes, and they were throwing in the peelings through the window. And they also were making remarks that this is good for pigs, and being that we are swine, we should have it. We traveled like that for 2 weeks. Finally, we came to Mauthausen. It was a very cool evening, and I remember the sky was royal blue, covered with stars, and it looked so beautiful and so terrible. There were thousands of people because different transports came before us, and of course Mauthausen had thousands upon thousands of people. They told us that if somebody wants, that there was a tremendous room, and they said whoever wants to go to that room to sleep over there can go, but I didn't want to go. I felt that I was closed in those trains for such a long time that I just I wanted, even it was so terribly cold, I wanted to see the sky and feel the wind. And in the morning, they took again that group of women who were all the time together from Plaszow. 3 miles we walked to a gypsy camp. It was called Wienengraben, and the commandant from that barrack was a woman gypsy. And she was really terrible. And she was walking with a big stick, and she really was beating us up. Not far away from the barrack was a farm. We could smell the cooking, and we could see the cows were coming close to the gates of the camp, and also children were playing ball, and we could see the smoke coming out from our chimney, and we could smell the coffee brewing, and we were so terribly hungry. Mauthausen was liberated the 5th of May, but they had forgotten about us. And the 7th of May, a group of American soldiers came to liberate us. We went to Poland with the transport. And we came to Krakow, and then we hired a smuggler, a person, to smuggle us through the border. We went to Munich, and this is where I met my husband, but we wanted desperately to get out of Germany. But finally in 1949, we came to America, my husband and I. We came through the International Rescue Committee. We came to Boston. We came a month later to New York, and in the middle of the night, I sometimes woke up, and I couldn't believe that I am in America. It was such a marvelous feeling, though I remember that it took me a very long time to get used to seeing a policeman in the street. I was petrified. And believe me that we never said that we are going to take a machine gun and go and shoot those terrible people, those tormentors, of course, those killers who killed us. We never said that. We only always hoped that this should teach a lesson to the world what oppression, hatred can do to millions of people.